Good morning. As we know, we've been talking about it this morning, our digital landscape has really grown up. What once used to have a very specific pixelated aesthetic has turned into something which we called retro now. Increasingly now, the way we look at things in a digital landscape, it's a lot more sophisticated, it's slick, and sometimes you need to do a double take to see what is real and what is digitally generated. And you can see here that things are looking more and more realistic. So reality as we know it is changing. And I will kind of go into that a little bit more throughout my presentation. But it's not just how things look in the digital landscape, it's also how we are operating there as well, how we're engaging and deciding to interact with it. We're forming relationships there, we're keeping pets there, we're nurturing in these spaces. We're also hosting work events, work, shopping. We're also thinking about how we can think about our health and well-being in these spaces and actually broaden it. And of course, live events are happening here, and it has really accelerated because of the pandemic. The way we are using technology has shot up by a lot, and there's a reason why we're talking about tech a lot more than ever before. It's because we are ready to adopt it, we are ready to use it on a daily basis. Because what is tech without people? Not much. So we need people to engage with this technology to make it make sense and to make it work. When we think about things happening in these spaces, what happens in these digital spaces doesn't stay there. They also transfer into the physical world, more and more so. So Candice and Ryan here, they got married in Decentraland, but that was also a binding contract, physically as well. So things happening in the digital space, memories made in the virtual worlds, they're not just virtual memories, they're not just things that happen digitally, they're also things that are transferring to our physical lives. And as we start thinking about that, let's think about our identities. How do we want to portray ourselves online? We're seeing that we want our digital representation to increasingly be more like our physical selves. So we're not thinking about, oh, let me create an alter ego or let me be someone completely different. Of course you can still do that, but when we look at consumer trends, people want their physical self and digital self to be quite alike. From a survey that we ran last year, we found that 76% of people in the US, UK, and China said that they want their avatar to express their individuality in ways that they can't in the physical world. So when you think about that, perhaps when you're exploring and doing things in a digital space, you're able to do a lot more. You're able to show a lot more of yourself. On top of that, 51% of people also say they feel like they can be more of their true and authentic self in these virtual spaces than they feel like they can in the physical world. So, working within an ad agency gets my mind thinking that perhaps these spaces are places where you can actually connect better with consumers. You can actually learn about their true selves and identify with them a lot more and actually personalize things to their digital selves. But that also means their physical version, you might want to tailor it differently. So the way you want to interact with people, you might have to think about it in two folds. With that, brands are also leaning into using virtual ambassadors. And with this, they are thinking about ways they can create a virtual simulation of a being that can reach out to you. So you're not just speaking to a chatbot, you're actually speaking to a virtual avatar. And it could be interacting with you, or it could be interacting with your avatar as well. So these are ways we're thinking about better connecting with people. But of course, this talk is about artificial intelligence. So imagine creating a virtual ambassador and latching on AI with that. And so we're seeing more brand examples where they're creating virtual ambassadors and they're bolting on AI. The example here is Nestlé Toll House. They created Ruth, who is an avatar to help you bake cookies. And of course, you can just share a recipe, and that could be that. But perhaps you want to engage more. You have a lot of questions to ask about this recipe. You want to personalize it. You want to change it. And Ruth, the cookie coach, is here to help make that happen. So thinking about how AI can help personalize experiences and help tailor it to the person that you're speaking to. What does this mean for the future of influencers or celebrities or models? It doesn't mean it's the end of them. In fact, perhaps they could also have a persona that exists in this space as well. So Eva Herzegovina here has created an AI simulation digital twin of herself. And she is allowing people to lease that AI version of herself for campaigns and catwalks. So I think this is quite interesting when you start thinking about the future of who you want to be engaging with. Do you want to be engaging with the physical person or the AI version, the AI digital twin? It's not exclusively about, again, the visual side of things. We're also looking into voice. So Grimes here has allowed AI artists to use her voice, and she just asked them to split the royalties, which seems fair. And in fact, recently there was a song that came out and she approved of it, so she actually quite liked the song that came out. Because there is that risk of your identity being taken away and it turning into something that you don't want it to be. But equally, it could be quite exciting to see where it could go, where it being created by someone else. So I think this is a ripe stage for us to think about experimentation, where things can be leading. It can be very, very exciting. But I'm not an AI expert, but what I am really integral to my job is understanding people and learning about people's habits and behaviors, why they're doing it, and more importantly, the expectations. So when it comes to our relationship with artificial intelligence, I think it's really integral here. There's a quote by futurist Ian Bearcroft. He said, "It's not about creating with artificial intelligence, it's about relating to it." We're actually going to have some sort of relationship with artificial intelligence. I'm going to play a short video here that he played during South by Southwest, where it's of Keanu Reeves explaining The Matrix to 3 teenagers. And it's interesting to learn about where things could potentially be going with our real versions, or our physical versions, and simulations of people.
I don't know, I was having dinner at a friend's house, this director, and he had some kids, and there was like a 13-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, and they hadn't seen the film The Matrix. And so the director's like, well, why don't you just tell them what it's about? So I start to say, well, there's this guy who's in a kind of virtual world, and he finds out that there's a real world, and he's really questioning what's real and not real, and he really wants to know what's real. And the young girl was like, why? And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, who cares if it's real? And I was like, what, you don't care if it's real? And she was like, no.
Isn't that wild?
It's awesome.
So wild or awesome, you decide, but where are things leading? We are at a point where we have to understand that many of Gen Alphas, so this is a generation still being born now, friends are real, and how many are synthetic, frankly, it may or may not matter. So in the future, we, our children, could be interacting with artificial intelligence, and it's their friend. It's someone that they go to for education, for learning, for comfort, for coaching, for therapy. In the future, the power of AI could simulate that of a person and maybe even be greater. And for a younger generation, because for them, the world is so wrapped in with technology, it doesn't matter as long as they get the results. And this is the reality, this is the future that we need to start thinking about and embracing. And particularly as brands, I think it's great that we started thinking about going about artificial intelligence, being more cautious about it, because so long as we are always questioning things, we are also going to catch mistakes and not have the same mistakes that we are trying to correct now with a lot of technology and platforms that are already out there. And I know what you're thinking when I talk about relationships and AI, lots of people start thinking about her, but this is the way things are going. So what was once sci-fi, we are catching up with sci-fi right now. Sci-fi, for a lot of things that has been kind of portrayed out there many years ago, actually, her is only 10 years old. We're catching up with it. And it's no longer science fiction, it's just science. So when it comes to our bonding and our relationship with AI, we will probably be having some sort of relationship with it. And we kind of need to, because it needs to have that personalized aspect of it. So when we're engaging with ChatGPT, it's not just a sort of sterile conversation that we're having with it. It's not just an exchange of you do something for me. We could be potentially doing a lot more. We could be bonding with it. And so this leads us on to potentially thinking about what will the future of families look like. If children already look to Alexa and say that's a +1 in our family, potentially in the future, we're going to start thinking about using artificial intelligence and technology to start preserving life and start creating a new lease of life as well. There's a quote here that talks about virtual children. So virtual children may seem like a giant leap from where we are right now, but within 50 years, technology will have advanced to such an extent that babies which exist in the metaverse or in virtual spaces are indistinct from those in the real world. Now that is arguable, but equally, if we're already operating and nurturing and forming relationships in these virtual spaces, perhaps, why not? Would this make us more sustainable? Will this still offer us the same emotional interaction and nurturing needs that we are seeking? It's another outlet for thinking about how our families could be. And if that's the case, as brands, how are you going to speak to these virtual children or virtual beings? How will you start identifying with them and connecting to your consumer that way? But let's think bigger. So this is the island of Tuvalu in the South Pacific. They are at risk of, by the end of the century, of being submerged in water. And so with that risk, what they've decided to do is, rather than it being submerged and everyone just relocating, they still want to preserve themselves. So they've created the first digital nation. And this is a virtual digital twin of Tuvalu, where it captures its people, its essence, its culture, its land. And so they want to be recognized as a first digital nation. So perhaps we're not just thinking about our physical selves, but also a virtual representation of that. And I'm going to end with this quote here by Bill Gates, which he said in 2001, but still resonates now. The advance of technology is based on making it fit in so that you don't really even notice it. So it's part of your everyday life. We're all probably in some capacity using artificial intelligence, but let's start thinking about what type of relationship we want to form with it. Whether it's virtual children or not, you decide, but in 50 years' time, that could be a reality. So thank you very much.